Daniel Has Spoken Research Channel. Today we have Chris um, here and to talk about Isaiah 53, whether it is messianic. So I would be giving a short opening about my ideas of what a messianic requirement is, and then Chris will be joining in an open dialogue. So, Chris, do you want to just do a short introduction about yourself first, and then I can open up?
Sure. I'm a Trinitarian. I was a minister for a little while. Due to my injuries, I can't work, so not a minister anymore. And yeah, just do little bits of YouTube stuff under my name, Chris Oakey 9841 on YouTube.
Yeah. So, I mean, feel free to like. I mean, I will try to pull up your channel and sort of display your channel as well. Just that people can know where to join. For example, um, so Chris. So, what is the channel name, Chris? Chris?
It's just Chris Oakey, Oakey
Yeah.
9841.
So, Chris. Okay. 9841. It's not coming up. Do you have some other markers, Chris? Are there any spaces, Chris? Okay.
No spaces, just CHRISOAKEY 9841. I can
Okay.
send you the link later, and you can just put it in the tag down the bottom. It doesn't matter if people don't come to it or not,
Yeah.
but
Okay.
they can see other videos if they find it. If they don't, they
I
don't.
did. I did find that. So I'll just display that
Okay.
here. So this is Chris's channel, Chris OK. So you can find him there, and you can subscribe. So thank you. And yeah, I mean, I'll provide my opening. So my ideas of what a Messiah is really stems from the Bible. The Bible does use Messiah quite a lot of times in the Old Testament, alluding to the kings of Israel as well as kings who are foreign. So we do get from Isaiah, the book of Isaiah, that Cyrus, during the restoration of the Second Temple, was indeed hailed as the Messiah that God worked with. So a Messiah is a key, iconic, kingly figure um, from the hermeneutics of Israelites, um, to who would be acting a shadow of God on earth, for example, and peoples of the king's time would go and pay their obedience to the king, in retrospect of being obedient to Almighty God. So, in that lens of historical context being set in the Old Testament, a king who is coronated on the throne of David, or who is in a position of authority over the geography of Israel, the Holy Land, is hailed as the Messiah. So when Cyrus had the kingdom, which basically he took over from the Babylonians, who had kingdom over the Holy Land, became the Messiah who paved way for the establishment of the Second Temple period in ancient Israel. So from this lens, from this with this backdrop of what a Messiah really is, we then have a messianic prophecies in the Old Testament, which some of the passages construed to be messianic were actually anachronisms, in my opinion. Some of the prophecies, like for example Psalm 110, which basically was fulfilled during David's time, and David was seated at the right hand of God, which is symbolism that God worked with David in defeating his enemies and establishing his kingdom. So, in from that lens of what a Messiah is and who the Jewish people were looking forward to, and what were they aiming at when they were looking forward to their Messiah, and while they investigated it with John the Baptist, was this obvious expectation that they would have a king who would liberate them from the uh, resident ungodly empire was the Roman Empire. So basically, they were looking forward to a Messiah who would come and restore Davidic kingdom for Israelites, um, setting up the kingdom of God and the glory of King David. In that lens, when we see Isaiah 53, um, which is really touted as a messianic prophecy, we do have things which may appear to be as if it's a figure in the a representation of Christ, just because Christ suffered, like whatever happened to Christ during his death, burial, and resurrection. So this episode of his is seen as a representation of this prophecy in Isaiah 53, which, in my opinion, isn't the case. And also, that Jesus' birth is being seen as the fulfillment of Isaiah's initial passages, 7 and 9, I suppose it is, 6 or 9. I'm not sure exactly whether it's 6 or 7, but the Emmanuel prophecy
Bit
is
of
coming in
each.
passages. So again, I see those ideas as anachronism. But we are specifically dealing with Isaiah 53. In Isaiah 53, one of the objections that I gave a heads up to Chris in the last time that we were interacting about this is the verse where it says okay. Okay, so there is a verse in Isaiah 53, verse number 10, where it reads, "Yet it was the Lord's will to crush him and cause him to suffer. And though the Lord makes his life an offering for sin, he will see his offspring and prolong his days, and the will of the Lord will prosper in his hand." So there's an indication that if this can be or alluded to be a messianic prophecy, and the suffering servant was Jesus, then we do see that the suffering servant will survive the suffering and will have offspring and will have his days prolonged. And during that time, the Lord will prosper his will in his hand. So, if the prophecy need to be considered, it has to be considered in total. So there cannot be elements of the prophecy in favor of the Messiah and elements of it um, not in favor of the Messiah. So that is my objection. And go ahead, Chris, and take your stage and share your thoughts.
All right. So earlier on, it talks about. Um, Sorry, could you scroll up to 3? I think it is. Yeah, thanks. So he was despised and rejected by mankind, a man suffering with, and familiar with pain. The you're right in that, in the point that people talk about Israel before this in Isaiah being the nation, and then some people refer to Israel being a single person. And there are a conflation of terms at times, which is one of the problems with prophetic words, because throughout Isaiah you see a change from stuff that's happening right then. And then, as you say, it talks about a virgin birth. The only virgin birth that's been recorded, as far as we know, is Jesus. So, in I think it is, I think it is chapter 7. We see it outside of what's happening right then, and we also see that all of the crushing of the Philistines and all of that is going to occur, and then this child is going to come. So there is stuff that's happening now, and then there is stuff that's happening later. And we see that in Isaiah 53. I think we see the same sort of thing. We see um, things happening now. Or, sorry, he's talking to the Israelites, or the tribe of Judah, really, and then referring to a specific person, but talking also about the group, because this specific person is going to be saving the group, and we see that saving of the group down more when it talks about the righteousness. Um, for that, I would go down to, I think it's verse 10. Uh, no, not verse 10, sorry, verse 11. After he has suffered, he will be the light of life and be satisfied. The knowledge, my righteous servant will justify many. So we see that it's not just talking about current or the one person, but that the one person's sacrifice will justify a large group. And we get similar message from Daniel 9, I think it is, when they're talking about an eternal king. So that's one of the reasons why we read it back into here. And I think the offspring is talking about the Lord's offspring, which is the Israelites, because God is the whole way through talking about his children, his people that he is going to protect. And I think that's the offspring that he's talking about, because Jesus was to be the king of or the Messiah was to be the king of the Jews.
Okay. Can I lead you in like rendering my understanding of the entire passage, Isaiah 53,
Yeah,
and then you can sort of indicate to me whether you agree with my understanding uh, by each verse or not. Would you do that with me?
yeah, yeah.
Okay, so let us do this. So it starts off saying, "Who has believed our message, and to whom has the arm of the Lord been revealed?" So it's a rhetoric sort of passage. So, who has believed our message? So, my response is, as an observer, I'm observing this passage being spoken to me, and I'm being questioned now. Who has believed our message? And to whom has the arm of the Lord been revealed? So, I would say Israel. Okay. So, from the perspective of Israel as a nation among the ancient of nations, I would say Israel has believed in in your message, and your arm has been revealed to Israel. So, would you agree with this?
Um, I think the arm has been revealed to both the Jews that he's protecting and also the surrounding nations who will see God defend Judah,
So in the
because Isaiah is talking about wars,
yeah,
including the areas of Lebanon and Egypt, and
yeah,
so I think it's not just God's revelation being um, to Israel. I think that's the focal point of it, which I would agree with. But I think there is also a message to the unbelievers, which is sort of hinted at with John 12:38, citing this as also being the people of unbelief, the ones who knew God but rejected Him, basically, which in this case would be the 10 tribes of the north who were rebelling against the lower Judah and sorry, Benjamin.
yeah. So in the historical context of Isaiah's time in the 8th century BC, um, Isaiah is a prophet that's actually working on unification of the tribes of Israel. So when this passage is given, who has believed a message in that part of the world? There is no nation that has believed in the message but Israel. So I would say the obvious answer is Israel. And to whom has the arm of the Lord been revealed? Arm of the Lord is a symbolism of the heavenly aid, the aid of the heavens host, the heavenly aid from the God of the hosts, who sends down angels as a force of the heaven to defeat the enemies. That's when God says, I will go forth and I will defeat the enemies for you. So the arm of the Lord is symbolism of the strength of the God of the hosts, heaven's hosts.
Yes,
So I would say Israel, because God went forth before Israel to defeat the enemies for Israel and establish that nation as promised to the patriarchs of the ancient times, like the Israelite prophets. So basically, you're telling me that you agree when I say my answer to that stanza is Israel.
well, I said I half agree because
Half agree,
I said that the people who were defeated also saw the power of the Lord, the arm of the Lord,
but they did not believe, right?
protecting.
The
They didn't believe, and then they were beaten.
Yeah, but it starts off asking me who has believed our message.
Yeah.
So I would say it's Israel, and
So yeah, Israel has believed, or but it's not Israel. It's actually Judah and Benjamin,
yeah, I mean,
because this is post the split.
okay, but you would agree with my answer, right? As Israelites, Jewish people, whether southern Judah or northern Israel, it's a different category. But in the larger context, it's Israel, and we would not have any problem believing that. Correct?
Yeah, I disagree. I think it's both, but um, because it says who has believed our message and whom has the arm of the Lord been revealed. So I think the and allows it to be both.
Yeah. So you mean to say it's both Israel and other nations as well?
Yeah, other nations have also seen his power,
Yeah,
but I
but then
think I think the focal point is still Israel.
okay. Thank you. So the next verse, he grew up before him like a tender shoot, and like a root out of the dry ground. He had no beauty or majesty to attract us to him, nothing in his appearance that we should desire him. And I'll combine the third verse as well. He was despised, he was despised and rejected by mankind, a man of suffering and familiar with pain, like one from whom people hide their faces. He was despised, and we held him in low esteem. So when I read this passage, Chris, the imagery that comes in front of my mind is enslaved Israel, beaten and bruised, uh, very familiar with suffering and pain, rejected, despised, and held in low esteem. So God says he grew up before him like tender shoot. And really, this small little humble plant, when God rescues them from Egypt through Exodus, it's like this tender shoot and like a root out of the dry ground. So there was no ground basically. They did not have land. And there you go. That's the beginning. There was no beauty or majesty, in that people. Basically, there were more majestic nations out there for God to work with. There was Assyria, Egyptians. There was all of these different nations surrounding, and this particular nation was humbled, despised, enslaved, beaten, bruised, rejected. So again, the answer to these two passages is Israel. Would you agree with me?
No, because this is singular um, in the language. So he grew up is singular, not they. He had no beauty or majesty um, to attract us to him. He was despised and rejected. It's all singular, not um, a group.
So who do you think it is instead?
Jesus. And I think that also because of the New Testament points back to this. Um, Philippians 2 6 to 11 sort of talks to verse 2, 1 Peter 2 22 to 25 talks more of the language of verse 3. He was despised and rejected. But again, it's singular. The language is singular, which makes me find it difficult to believe that this is Israel or the tribe of Benjamin, but sorry, the tribe of Judah and Benjamin, but actually talking about a man.
Okay, I'll come back to the case in a minute, but I just want to go through with you some of the key verses here. Why would God say that Jesus as an individual had no beauty, that God was not attracted by this individual? In fact, if we see the idea behind God incarnate in Christianity, God Himself becomes man, and then why would God become a man with no beauty? And then, I mean, it doesn't really go well. Um, Verbatim, every verse of the stanza, if you approach the text in a critical way, it would make no sense for God to articulate this language about Himself becoming a man, without any beauty or majesty. Um, and very graphic, saying nothing in his appearance that we should desire him.
Right.
If God did not desire himself, like, these things don't really comply well to what God would
Well,
why would God do this?
that's a
Basically, why
very
would God do this?
Muslim response, because
Muslim.
Islam teaches God is the greatest of whatever. He's the even when he says he's a deceiver, he says he's the best of deceivers. So, the assumption is whenever God if God takes on human flesh, well, obviously he's going to be the biggest, the tallest, the strongest, the most powerful. But that was one of the contrasts that Jesus did that made some people reject him. Even on Palm Sunday, they were expecting this warrior to come in and conquer Rome, and he rode in on a donkey, not on a giant white steed of majesty, which is what they were expecting from Daniel. Solomon, no, sorry, not Solomon, Saul, King Saul, the first king, was described as being beautiful, as being tall, as being someone that men looked to and said that's the king. Where David was this scrawny little runt who beat Goliath. And so, coming from the line of David, you know, um, you see a similarity with Jesus that people overlooked him. People didn't just go, "That's God in flesh," and just collapse because of his majesty, but they didn't realize he was born in a manger. You know, he started in the base, and then people were following him because of his teachings, because of his power, and because of the authority he brought with him, not because of his showiness, if you know what I
Okay,
mean.
I get your
Yeah.
point. I get your point. But I just wanted to highlight when you implied it's very Muslim response. I would say it is not, because the obvious Muslim response would be Joseph was a man with unsurpassed beauty, who was praised in the Quran in 12. The Egyptian ladies thought of Joseph to be one of the angels on earth, just because he was so beautiful. So the Quran, it's pretty clear that it doesn't do the same things to Muhammad, Prophet Muhammad, right, or to any other prophet. So the Quran does recognize beauty as not a thing with which God impresses. Otherwise, he would have had all of the prophets equally beautiful and majestic appearing, but it's not the case. It's just reserved for Joseph.
Yeah. I guess I was meaning specifically with Allah because everything with Allah is the best, the most majestic, every attribute is the greatest, the most magnificent. It's always that. So to think of God coming in something less, most Muslims, as you know, reject even the concept that God would take on flesh because that's beneath him.
Yeah, that's correct.
Yeah,
So it's not an Islamic concept to believe God incarnates into a man or into
no,
anything. So yeah, I mean, that point. Besides, I mean, there's another thing that I wanted to highlight is when you said even God is the best of the deceivers. That is a deliberate misreading of the Quranic verse. God is not a deceiver. We can talk about it another time. How that verse is deliberately pulled out of semantic range to imply something else. But that's fine. That's it for a different time.
yep,
So in relation to this passage 2 and 3, I would want to specifically point to you that there is um, tremendous scholarship, even among Christians, who would agree. Even Samuel Green, if you know him, I've also debated him in one of the topics, and potentially will be debating him in the future. So Samuel Green also thinks Isaiah has entire chapters in the singular, referring to Israel as that suffering servant in a singular pronoun he. So Christian
yep,
scholars agree that Isaiah has passages where it talks about the nation of Israel in the singular he, masculine pronoun, referring to them as a individual rather than with a plural they, right?
Yes.
So why would you not grant here that it's the same servant, especially when we have identified in verse 1 that it's Israel, and now Israel has this humble beginnings and it grows like this tender shoot, and despised by nations, despised by people around them, they grew up into this, um, having the Lord's arm with them. They grew up and they became something. So, what why would you necessarily say in this case the singular plural is not Israel but an individual such as Christ?
Well, I, I I think you can possibly argue that way until you get further down in the text.
Okay.
But I think the singular is quite important. I agree with you that there are times when the singular is used to talk about Israel, in Isaiah,
Yeah.
um, and I agree you could argue that here, but I think that that becomes more of an issue when you talk about the death, um, and the made righteous, because
Okay.
if Israel is the one that is suffered and killed, then how can Israel make Israel righteous? Because they're dead. That doesn't work anymore.
Okay. So I will sort of say you kind of agree with me that it's Israel, but we will go
No,
down
no,
and we will discover more.
I disagree that it's Israel, but
Okay.
I acknowledge that it is possible at that reading
Okay.
to argue that the singular could be referring to Israel,
Okay.
but I don't think it is.
Okay. So
Yep.
I'll read on the next passage, like the next verse. Surely he took up our pain and bore our suffering, yet we considered him punished by God, stricken by him and afflicted. So as an observer, um, I can say, surely he took up our pain, the nations around surrounding Israel for their iniquities, right? They were ungodly nations, and they committed atrocities on this particular nation. And this nation of Israel, Jewish people, the Hebrews, endured much of the suffering, much of the oppression that was inflicted upon them. And they go like, okay, now the observers, now the people go like, surely he took up our pain and bore our suffering. And people are like, okay, if it was not for Israel, we would be enslaved or whatever it is. As an observer, I'm thinking, wow, Israel had to endure these pain and suffering, otherwise I would be enslaved as well and I would be despised and things of that nature. So surely he took up our pain and bore our suffering, yet we consider him punished by God. So when I'm looking at it, I'm like, oh, God is punishing them. God is punishing these people. He has these people enslaved by Pharaoh. He has these people um, at constant warfare in the Levant. So these people are being persecuted and punished, would be one of the observations, right? Stricken by him and afflicted. God is striking at them and God is afflicting them. But he was pierced for our transgressions. So the realization also follows, but this nation was pierced for our transgressions. He was crushed for our iniquities. The punishment that brought us peace was on him,
Right.
and
The
his
people
and by
around
his
him
wounds
were
we
doing
are
the
healed.
oppressing.
Sorry.
The people around Israel were doing the oppressing.
Hmm.
So to say, surely he took up our pain when they're the ones doing the oppressing
Hmm.
seems a little bit odd, because that wouldn't be something they would be rejoicing in. That, well, we got to beat him up for a while and then God kicked our butts. That's not a
So
joyous thought.
it's like this contemplative passage where there's contemplation happening by the observer, and the observer is like, we are causing him harm. At the same time, they are bearing our, they are suffering for our sins, and they're enduring our pain. So it's
Right.
contemplative.
So, but why would the people who get their ass kicked by God be rejoicing that God kicked their butt?
You mean to say the
But
Israelite?
if you think of the hour being Israel
Hmm.
and the he being the Messiah, then it works because he, the Messiah, took the pain that Israel were feeling. He bore our suffering. That's a joy because that's a relief to Israel.
So in both of these contexts, like if I consider the R to be Israelites and he to be the Messiah, again, passages 4 and 5 are still contemplative. They are like Israelites, the Jewish people who actually converted to become Christians and believed in the teachings of Christ. If they are contemplating this, that they are telling, um, like for example, let's think the R is Paul, right? He who actually caused suffering upon the early Christians, for example. So
Yep.
if we consider R to be Paul, now Paul is contemplating. Surely he took up our pain and bore our suffering, yet we considered him punished by God, stricken by him and afflicted. But he was pierced for our transgressions, he was crushed for our iniquities. The punishment that brought us peace was on him, and his wounds are healed. Is still contemplative, that somebody who did the damage later on contemplates. So the same situation would apply to neighboring nations who inflicted Israel and then contemplated that Israel actually suffered because of their iniquities.
That would only be if they were saved by that suffering. Were they saved by that suffering? They were destroyed. So they weren't saved. So that wouldn't be a contemplation of, oh, good, we are safe because of this. We have peace because of this, because they were destroyed.
Yeah,
That
I get
that
your point.
doesn't work.
I
You
get your
know.
point. But
Yeah.
this passage, the contemplation in this passage is a rhetorical, contemplative, contemplative passage where an observer is contemplating
But
the status of
it's
Israel.
it's not just rhetoric. It's meaningful. You
Yeah,
can't just
it's a
dismiss it
poem.
because you can go, well, oh yeah, it is talking about someone, and it is talking about that someone relieving a bunch of people, but let's ignore that
Yeah,
context.
poems are often composed in this fashion stylistically, as in a third person contemplative manner. Poems are often structured like this. Not just biblical poetry, but any poetry
Yeah,
would
but
have these
this
themes.
isn't poetry though. Um this is a prophecy. I mean, you can some might say that it's slightly poetic language, but it's prophecy. Like things like the Psalms are definitely poetry. This is from a book of prophecy, talking about wars, talking about the future, the past, the present. So to just say, "Oh well, this is poetry," and then allow that to ignore the context
Mm.
doesn't do it justice. I don't think.
So I would say now the case is gradually developing towards the Messiah um, being an individual rather than a whole of the nation in your favor, right? So this is the
Yeah,
tipping point. It's tipping in your favor right now, right?
yeah,
That's how you would perceive it.
yeah.
Okay.
That's why I think the hour is talking about the collective. The he going
Yeah.
back to the
Yeah. Okay.
previous
Okay.
is suggesting the singular.
Yeah. Okay.
So
So
yeah,
let's look into the next verse. So we all, like sheep, have gone astray. Each of us has turned to our own way, and the Lord has laid on him the iniquity of us all. So this passage here is declarative that um, people did not really reform and believe as we sort of construed to be the case in 4 and 5, um, to validate the position that iniquities were born on him. um, but here what we see is a narrative that clarifies my position much better. It says we all like sheep have gone astray. So the contemplation is as follows: they are thinking they're thinking that they have gone astray.
Yep.
Each of us has turned to our own way, not the way of the Lord, not really believing, and the Lord has laid on him the iniquity of us all. So now it sort of concludes that the punishment has been inflicted on him, even though we have not believed, even though we have not turned to the Lord. So basically, the Christian position is the Messiah takes away the iniquity. Um, the cross, Jesus' death on the cross takes away the iniquity if you believe in him. If you
Yes.
don't believe in him, then the death and resurrection of Christ does not work in your favor, and you still become condemned.
Yes. Well, there's a vagueness in Hebrews. I forget which verse that talks about God's chosen people still being God's chosen people despite their disbelief. And you do see throughout the New Testament, or sorry, the Old Testament, and the promises of David's line that there will always be someone on the throne who is from him, which we say is Jesus. But you see a continuation of God's faith and or it's God's faithfulness, um, despite their disbelief. And Isaiah here, the reason that the nations warred and the reason for all of the combat was because the kings had rejected God, and so there was a punishment paid for it. So I think this is talking to the people of the time as well as the prophetic that is to come, that there is um, the stuff that's happening is because of what they've done. So I think that's why it's talking about the iniquity of us all. But you're right. Christians read back into this through the perspective of John 3:15 and 16. Whoever believes in him will have eternal life. Um, Ephesians says that. Romans says that. Um, most of the New Testament says that the sins of those who believe in him, whoever believes in him, are taken and put on the cross. And that's where some people say, well, your God became a curse, and it's not he became a curse. Our curses were put on him through that.
Yeah, so the passage in verse 6 is not entirely in favor of your position. Would you agree?
Not entirely, yes.
Okay, okay. So let's move
I
on.
think it is because of the mixture of what's happening to them now and what's to come. But yes, I would agree with you.
Okay, thank you. So let's read on. He was oppressed and afflicted, yet he did not open his mouth. He was led like a lamb to the slaughter, and as a sheep before its shearers is silent, so he did not open his mouth. By oppression and judgment he was taken away. Yet who of his generation protested? For he was cut off from the land of the living. For the transgression of my people he was punished.
Right. Now, if you remember Jesus' trial with Pilate, Pilate was frustrated because Jesus wasn't answering him and explaining how innocent he was, basically. And people point back to that as being that um, he rem- he remained silent. He didn't deny anything. He was just led to death, and Pilate even tried to give him outs by sending him to the king by saying, "Well, how about I just have you beaten?" He had him beaten, and then went back to the Jews and said, "Well, isn't that enough?" And they said, "No, we want to kill him."
Yeah, I mean, this passage, I can sort of, I can grant that, the trial of Jesus would be depicted in the imagery of his trial and his leading him to the cross, where he endures punishment and all of that sort of stuff, can be um, described in these words, and it's a fitting description. I mean, I wouldn't say no, but at the same time, I can still correlate the suffering of Israel as a nation, them in all of their history, that explains their familiarity with pain and suffering, can equally be argued to have unfolded
But they were
in these very words.
they were pretty outspoken about their oppression and the pain that it was suffering them. They weren't silent, and they did fight back. So I wouldn't say that they were led like sheep or like lambs to the slaughter, or that they didn't open their mouths, because they wrote about it, they talked about it, they fought. They were still conquered, but they certainly resisted.
Yeah, I mean, when I said I can grant it in favor, I mean, when I can grant this passage to describe the imagery of Christ, I sort of um, don't preclude any resistance by Christ, but I can grant it. Whatever ways he protested, even to God in the prayer at the Garden of Gethsemane, would still be not. uh, I mean, I can overlook it. I can not consider those um, appeals of Christ as anywhere coming. I mean, this passage should not take away the amount of the grip of the authorities over Christ. It
Yep.
should not take away, even when Jesus appeals to God to take away the cup from him. But uh, I
Yeah.
don't want to contest the passage with that, right? So in a
Yep.
similar way, I don't want to contest um, the resistance offered by Israelites in the larger context of them being gripped under authority by the most powerful nations of that time. So equally, I would want to grant that to both, to Christ as well as to the nation of Israel. If you agree, with my position that I'm
Yeah,
granting.
I would
Yeah.
disagree, because I think they really did fight hard,
Okay.
and lots of people died.
Yeah. Okay. Leading into the Levant, or I mean, there are different criteria here. Their time spent in Egypt and their times in the Levant. And in the Levant, if we go with the earlier disposition that these were northern tribes and southern Judah, and
Yep.
southern Judah in the civil war really behaved like a lamb, and the northern Israel was the oppressor of the southern tribes, basically. So the northern Israel allied with Assyria, with Syria. I think there was it was what was the name the Syrians used?
Um, the no, not the Byzantines. It was Babylons. Babylonians.
No, not the
No,
Babylonians, but okay,
no, I
whatever,
can't remember. Sorry, I've
whoever they
only
were
had
allied
2 hours
with from
sleep.
the northern tribes. Assyria was one of the nations that actually came to assist southern Judah instead. Initially, I think they assisted. Yeah,
They were
I'd have to,
assisting
northern Israel.
northern Israel. Yeah,
Yeah. Anyway, I mean, let's get into the dynamic later. But the southern Judah initially suffered up until when their king, runs over to Assyria to take help because Syria and northern Israel were allied. Yeah, that's correct. The Syria and northern Israel were allied, and the king of southern Judah runs to Assyrian Empire to seek help. Okay, so that was happening during that time, but even before the Assyrians could help them, they were defeated by northern Israel and taken captives, right? So that had happened, and the prophets were crying. The prophets were like, how could you take your own fellows as captives, and
Yeah.
things like that. So um I think the prophet was Prophet Oded, right? Oded. Prophet Oded was
Yeah, I can't remember the name of
yeah,
him at
okay.
the moment.
Okay, so I
But
think
yeah,
from that lens, we can see that southern Judah really behaved like a lamb. Um, in that context, would you agree?
no, I would say
Mm.
you have an argument with verse 8 that they were oppressed and judged,
Mm.
but I wouldn't say that they were led like a lamb because they definitely fought, and that was part of the thing was this is Jews killing Jews basically, or this is
Mm.
Israelites killing Israelites.
Mm.
This isn't good.
Mm. So when there is this thing, um, yet which of this generation protested? That phraseology resonates very well uh, in that civil dispute,
Right, the kings
civil war.
protested, and as you said, the prophets even protested.
Yeah, that prophets
So
protesting,
there was protestation for all of the wars that you're
but the war
talking
did
about.
happen. The thing is, what the prophets protested was the arrest, basically the arrest of. I mean, obviously Isaiah prophesied against the battle for sure, but what Prophet Ode did was he condemned the northern tribes for taking fellow Israelites into captives.
Yeah,
So that's what was being reprimanded or condemned by the prophet Oded. Yeah. Anyway, I mean
yeah,
that's fine. I don't want to stick too much here in this passage. I can grant that um, there is some sort of equality, but I agree that you don't see that to be the case. You see this more of um, unravel clearly with the Messiah. Okay, so
yeah,
that's your position. Okay, all right. So moving forward, he was assigned a grave with the wicked and with the rich in his death, though he had done no violence, nor was any deceit in his mouth. And I would agree that this passage completely delves into the burial of Christ more appropriately. And
well, the
I would
death
have
and burial.
I
But
would
yeah,
not have much to argue here in case of
yeah,
Israel, right? Okay. Yet it was the Lord's will to crush him and cause him to suffer. And though the Lord makes his life an offering for sin, he will see his offspring and prolong his days, and the will of the Lord will prosper in his hand. Okay, here, let me analyze this from your point of view. So I would say the first verse, yet it was the Lord's will to crush him and cause him to suffer, would be the Messiah, for example.
okay.
And though the Lord makes his life an offering for sin, Messiah again, he will see his offspring and prolong his days. Now, this is where the incompatibility becomes obvious. So I can no longer assume the same pronoun his to be the Messiah. Here, the same his pronoun is Messiah, but in the following uh, verse, I mean, the following sentence, he's not, because clearly the God incarnate, Jesus in God incarnate cannot have further offspring. is a obvious um, limitation there.
Who do
So
Christians call their father?
who do Christians call the Father?
Their father, yeah. We pray our Father in heaven,
Yeah, that's a God in heaven.
right? So we are his offspring. We are adopted as children of God.
So there is a switch.
Just like Israel were the children of God, we are the children of God also. We are his offspring.
Okay, so you're taking this in a
A
okay, his
metaphor.
life is an offering for sin, and
Yeah.
he will see his offspring.
And if you think back to
Yeah,
Isaiah
oh
9
God.
6, it
Yeah, we
says
will,
that the
Lord.
Son will be called Prince of Peace, Mighty Counselor, Almighty Father, and God. Sorry, Mighty Father, Almighty God. So it shows that the Son the born of the Virgin will be called Father, and the Godhead is called Father by every Christian. So I would say that's the offspring, and they're the ones who are saved.
Okay, you want to see that sort of a meaning to be assigned to this phrase here.
Because Israel is also seen as God's offspring at different points as well.
Okay, it doesn't really um there is a there is a gap here where meaning is imported. Would you agree?
A gap where meaning is important.
Meaning is imported. Meaning is brought in.
Yep. Yep, I'd agree with that.
Okay, all right. So and the he is God, the Father, and his is obviously the Messiah.
Well, I would say, yeah.
Okay, so in verse 11,
Um,
after he has suffered, okay, this he is again Messiah, not God, right?
yeah.
After he has
This is the.
suffered
I
life.
think the he and his are both Jesus in this
Yeah.
case.
Yeah.
Yeah.
In 11, especially in 11, yeah,
Yeah.
and be satisfied by his knowledge. My righteous servant will justify many. Okay,
And the
in
my
11,
there would
basically
be
the
the
he and
Father.
his are reversed. His is God and he is the Messiah in 11.
Yes.
Yeah. Okay. And he will bear their iniquities. Therefore, I will give him a portion among the great and will divide the spoils with the strong because he poured out his life unto death and was numbered with the transgressors. For he bore the sin of many and made intercession for the transgressors.
And that's where again I find it hard to accept that the he is talking about all of Israel, because if it was all of Israel, how did all of Israel die and then make righteous
Okay, I
the
mean, I
many?
would say it still equally applies in both scenarios. One of the scenarios that I considered earlier on is salvation through Christ is applied only in case of belief, compliance, not transgression. So transgression, we do not see in this passage transgression. Even when we import meaning into the word his offspring, we are just importing meaning, assuming that the offspring is compliant. But uh, the passage is basically woven with transgression. So never once does the passage say the transgressors actually comply um, into
I'm a
belief.
transgressor. I have sinned. All have sinned and fall short of the glory of God, and the punishment for sin is death. The one that makes us righteous is Jesus. His death paid our sins, and through his death we are saved. And Abraham was promised that through his seed all nations would be blessed.
But if I apply um, the the other perspective, which is my perspective, that is, it's a nation of Israel, then I would also see these passages from um, I would see 10, for example, as this that yet it was Lord's will to crush him and cause him to suffer is Israel. And though the Lord makes his life an offering for sin, because God chose Israel as a model nation to impress upon the nations of the world to so they come and worship the Lord of Abraham. Okay,
But that's not
so
what an offering does.
an offering is basically um, consecrating, like for example Mary was offered to the temple of Lord, right? So she was offered to the temple of the Lord for services. So just like that, the nation of Israel is consecrated to be providing services to the Lord. So in that sense,
No, that's
uh,
not what an offer. Or that's only one type of offering.
yeah, yeah.
The sacrificial offering was predominantly um, for sins, and
No,
the
I'm not
and
talking
the
about the animal sacrifice.
atonement for sins.
Yeah, I'm not talking about the animal sacrifices. What I'm talking about is like the nation is consecrated to be providing services to the Lord. The nation as a whole is taken as an example. Even when Jeremiah the prophet goes and says, "Look, God chose this wonderful knickers made out of quality material, but then these knickers were thrown under the rock, and um, the vermin had eaten it, right?" And Jeremiah goes back and wears the knickers, and the shame can be seen. So God's like, I chose you with for this purpose, but now your iniquities expose your shame. So there was a purpose in God choosing this nation. The purpose was that there could be mitigation uh, delivered to the nations of the world, so the nations of the world can come and worship the Lord of Abraham. So in that sense the nation was taken as an offering. And I read those things here: he will see his offspring and prolong his days, meaning God will put up, despite their transgressions, God will put up with Israel for a time and prolong his days, right? And we see the prolonging happening in the second temple period.
But
That's when
you're
the
skipping
prolonging is
over the
happening.
offering for sin part.
Yeah,
You're skipping over the offering for sin. The offering for sin
yeah.
was a blood sacrifice. It was not a thank you, and this is an example. It was not serving in the temple, it was a blood sacrifice. And
So
we see Jesus dying as a blood sacrifice to
okay,
atone for sin. And
yeah,
that's the important part, is the
I get that
atonement for
perspective.
sin.
I get that
Yep.
perspective, but in my perspective, the way I read this text is as follows: And though the Lord makes his life an offering for sin, like Israel as a nation has been taken as an example nation that suffers, that provides services to the God of Abraham, for the sins of this entire, all of these different nations that are godless. For their sins, to mitigate their sin, nation of Israel works as an offering.
How?
In that they provide services to God's glory, and their duty was to um, reconcile the nations of the world to worship the God of Abraham.
What services do they provide to reconcile to God?
One of the examples we can see is the prophets being sent to Nineveh to unite people, and Nineveh was an event that predates Isaiah,
Yep.
right? So I'm reading in that. in that sense. Okay, let me finish this,
All right.
Chris.
Yep.
So he will see his offspring and prolong his days. So God is saying, there is of course a prophecy about your destruction, but I'm going to prolong your days after that destruction, which is like referring to Babylonian captivity. And God says, after that, I'm going to prolong it. Right. So He prolongs it up until Christ, and the will of the Lord will prosper in his hand. So God is projecting the will of the Lord will prosper in his hand. After he has suffered, he will see the light of life and be satisfied by his knowledge, and my righteousness servant will justify many. So we see the second temple period evolve, where there was hope in the prophets, and the sages of Israel, such as Ezra and Malachi. These people really breathed new life and restored the temple, the functioning of the temple. So this is unfolding and will bear the iniquities. Therefore, I will give him a portion among the great, and will divide the spoils with the strong, because he poured out his life unto death, and was numbered with the transgressors. For he bore the sin of many, and made intercession for transgressors. So, this is a prophecy of good hope, basically, in foreseeing the future of Israel after a um, tumultuous period in their historical timeline. And that's how I would see and read this passage, uh, a- as Israel as the suffering servant. But I can see the point of view where you come from, and it's tempting. I mean, if I am a messianic um, Christian, I wouldn't necessarily see this passage as, if I believed that Jesus died on the sins, on the cross for our sins. I would definitely be able to read that imagery in this passage for sure. I can see that. I can see where you come from. But at the same time, it's ambivalent in nature. That the Jewish people basically read this in favor of Israel as a nation, a suffering servant, and as an observer, as a Muslim observer, um, who has both of these narratives to look at, and the larger context of Isaiah, I would I would definitely lean on the Jewish interpretation of this passage, that it is the suffering nation, Israel as a suffering nation. So even though at the same time I believe that Jesus was the Messiah, um, I would lean on the passage to mean Israel as the suffering servant.
But how did Israel die and then see the light of life?
So metaphorically speaking, the exile would be the death, and cutting off from the land of life would be that they were taken away from the Holy Land. Holy Land was a possession that was promised to them, and was full of life. Milk and honey flows there, and all of that sort of imagery comes up, of being full of life in that Holy Land. So being cut off from that place, led into exile, would be depicted in the way that death came to them, and they were cut off from life, and that sort of thing.
But earlier in Isaiah, several times they were told that they would be separated from the land and then they would be returned to the land.
Hmm.
That didn't use death imagery, that used you'll be driven away, you'll be scattered, and
Hmm.
then you will be drawn back.
Hmm.
This
Yeah.
is this is very specifically talking about death. Because he poured out his life unto death, which works with a sin offering because sin offering was the death of something to atone for sin, and it's saying that he is atoning for sin. So that's why I bring it back to that sin offering, because it's very specifically a sin offering and a making us righteous through that sin offering. And I'm wondering how Israel and when Israel died to atone for the sins of others. Because I can't think of a scriptural passage where Israel died to atone for sins.
Yeah, I mean, as I sort of explained that, that's a nation that's has a responsibility, a role to perform to reconcile the sinful nations of their times to with the Lord of Abraham, to come and worship the Lord of Abraham and shun uh, the abomination of idol worship, which I believe is the sin, is the ultimate sin, that people would be dedicated to idol worship. So, yeah,
Yeah.
I mean, I can see where you come from as a Christian, Chris, and I can, yeah, I can see how tempting it is that you interpret this passage to be messianic, provided, I mean, given the factual historicity of Jesus's death, burial, and resurrection. Okay, which obviously, as a Muslim, I don't believe to have happened.
Yep.
And I think in a couple of days I will be debating with Zonzi on Kenisha's channel on Matthew 26, where I would explain how those passages and what they mean to me as a Muslim, and how I would understand those passages in the gospel. So hopefully that will sort of enumerate what I think about those passages to you as well. And yeah, fantastic. I really enjoy talking to you. And do you have things to say? Please go ahead.
Um, yeah, the only thing I'd like to add to this is that one of the other reasons that we look back on this and read into it, the messianic stuff, is because all of the gospel writers draw us back there. And the disciples writing epistles sometimes draw us back, like Peter draws us back to this and says, "This is Jesus." On top of when we read through, and it seems to be talking singularly and talking about the atonement of sins. And so, whilst we look primarily at the text itself, as a Christian, we also look back at it and the way that the disciples were taught and taught what it meant.
Mm.
But thanks for the chat. That was good.
Yeah, fantastic. I mean, I enjoyed talking to you. And basically, I did not check my channel. What's happening? If someone's watching here or not? Let me just check it. And if they want to join, they can join us with their questions. So just give me a second. I will have a check if there's any.
Yep.
Okay. So if people watching us, if you want to join, let us know. If you don't want to join, okay, there's hardly any here. There's just one person, I suppose. So anyway, I mean, good chatting to you, Chris, and I'm looking forward to more chats down the line. And yeah,
Yeah.
feel free to shoot me an email if you feel like we can have a chat on something. Then yeah, and I wish you all the best, and God, God's help and God's blessing on you, and looking forward to having more chats.
All right.
All right,
Thank you.
all right, bye.